Full room too. Love it. And all the regulars too. You guys know who you are. Feels like a Tuesday. What is it? A Wednesday? It's a Wednesday. Okay. Yeah. Off season is just a blend, right?
So what have your emotions been like since the last day of the season to now? Like, what have you gone through in terms of with JG and now you're here? Like, kind of how have you processed all this?
Boy, emotions. That's a deep. You went deep there. And that's hard for me because I'd struggle to express my emotions. It was a long process of reflection and trying to find those avenues for growth for myself and really for this defense. Whether or not I at the time I didn't know if I was going to be here, but I was still looking at it through that lens. And just finding ways that how can I be better at my job, talking to other people. How can I serve better, serve the coaches, serve the players to allow them to do their job at a higher level? So, it was ultimately just reflection on performance. I wouldn't say anything was ever really emotional, So
What does it mean just to run it back here?
that means a lot because I love the players. And, I know that we can be better than what we put on tape. And so I'm fortunate for the opportunity to get another shot at that.
How was it for your family, Nick? How difficult was it for your wife and your kids just going through that?
You're saying just not knowing
Not knowing where you're going to be, not knowing where you're going to
You wouldn't believe what my wife is important to my wife with that kind of stuff. She's just, peppering me about when she can get her nails done. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, if Mike wants me to come in, like I got to be ready to come in. And so she's still kind of mad about that. I don't think she's gotten her nails done, but that is probably the hardest thing on her. Otherwise she's down. She knows the profession and she's down for whatever.
What was it like for you though? What was it like for you not knowing because you're still under contract?
Yeah.
But they haven't released you. You don't know who the coach is going to be. Then the coach gets hired. You know if he's retaining you. Like, what's that like for you? Kind of.
Yeah, it definitely gets like you get more anxious as it goes. The first 3 weeks, you knew it was going to be a long process, and I know how thorough Monty is, and I knew whoever he was going to hire was going to be thorough, just like him, and so I knew it was going to be a long process. But that's not to say that at the end you don't start to get really anxious because you want clarity on, hey, what should I be working on right now, right? The first 3 weeks was easy, I would say, because I had so many things that I could work on regardless of what was going to happen. But then I started getting to the point where I was like, I want a free agent list here. I want, all these things. And you start to get antsy for it. And then you just, you take a step back and you say like, hey, let it run its course. And, you're not going to be in 3 months thinking about like, man, that 1 week right there, it really like it's you got to let the process happen. So, yeah, there's some anxiety, I would say, towards the end just of the unknown. But I think that's just kind of me being wired a certain way that always wants to have clarity on like what should I be doing right now when I wake up this morning, which at the end of the day doesn't matter.
But at the same time, are you not watching other positions get filled and you're like, all right, if I'm not retained here, I might not have many opportunities left because jobs are getting filled? Like, is that ever?
Yeah, that's just not in my control, though. I know at the end of the day, it's not about the job that you have; it's about the job that you're able to do. And so, whatever opportunity would have came, I would have embraced it and done my best.
So did you realize kind of throughout the whole process that this was a genuine possibility that you would be back here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Monty was very clear about that. I mean, the communication was great. I was in constant communication with Mike, obviously after he got hired. And, yeah, I know that they wouldn't have, had me under contract still had it not been a possibility.
Nick, you said last season you felt like you were better than what you showed. Why weren't you guys better, or why didn't you reach the expectations you had for the defense?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables to that. The most important ones to me are the controllables for us in the building. and it's layered. You know, I mean, there's things that we could do better schematically. There's things that we could do better with a technique. There's ways that we could teach it better. There's ways that we could execute it better. There's ways that I could call it better. So it's never one thing, and I know that's always a reoccurring theme when during the season of, hey, what went wrong this game? Well, it's not just one thing that happened. It's a combination of multiple things, and that's when you look back at last season, it's how do we move the needle on all those little things that we have control over. So that's really the main focus of how do we learn from our mistakes and learn from our failures and understand that agitation is growth if you embrace it that way, so that when we move forward we can be our best selves.
With you having been here and knowing the roster on defense, does that put you in a different place than a lot of the other coaches? And what's that like integrating with a new staff when you're already kind of ahead of the game a little bit now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, just my knowledge of who we have, it's just you can eliminate the process of when you get into a new place of learning your own guys. Not to say that we're not going to deep dive our own guys and figure out what their improvement plans need to be, but we have a very good baseline for that. And then I'm a resource for everyone who's new walking in the building on, honestly, every side of both sides of the ball, right? Not to say that I'm as much of an expert in the other side, but whatever people, have questions on, it's cool to be that resource for whoever needs it.
You're always evolving, obviously, but as far as just schematically, do you expect much change as far as how you call things?
Every year, honestly, so like that, I always believe in the tear it down and build it back up. And it's like kind of multiple layers to that in terms of the game's changing, right? And offenses are changing. So what is 2026 going to look like? What do we have to be prepared to stop with what the best offenses in 2025 are doing and kind of where it's moving? But then also what wasn't good for us, and how do we change that? And, as we start to get into acquisition, like what do our guys do best? And you got to put those guys in the positions that, brings out their strengths. And so every year you have to look at it. I think sometimes the hardest part of what you're asking is not changing, right? Because if you didn't see that ball go through the hoop, are you gonna adjust your jump shot, right? And if you're convicted on whatever that is part of your jump shot or whatever that is part of our scheme, that you didn't necessarily see the ball go through the hoop, but that it's something that you want to do and it's going to lead to success. Sometimes it's harder to stay convicted on those things, and run it back. So there's layers of that. There's going to be changes, but then there's going to be things that, we're going to want to keep because we believe in it.
Going from a defensive-minded head coach to an offensive-minded head coach affect the way you're either maybe not going to call the game, but when it comes to installing plays or how you're going to coach or develop players, like how will that change your day-to-day?
Yeah, I think I don't have the answer completely on that because there's so many things that have popped up already in my mind of like, oh man, like how are we going to do this with Mike, because there's just, and I don't know if it has to do with an offensive coach versus a defensive coach. I think it's just a new coach. It's just like, what's our operation, with this in practice and in walkthroughs? Like, are we going to, we have all these defensive situational stuff we want to cover. Are we going to do it together? Am I doing it separate, right? So, that's just something that I'm going to, we haven't been working super long together so far, but we'll figure that out as we go. And obviously Mike's going to be really clear with what he needs from me in that regard. But I think the biggest thing that pops in my head with your question is the resource. And obviously Mike's knowledge of the offenses that exist in this division. And honestly, they're, pretty prevalent around the league. And just being able to get his perspective on that and figure out what gives those offenses issues or what they find that they can attack with things that we do, that's going to lead to a lot of growth for me, honestly, because it's like I don't know what I don't know yet. And so just being able to have those conversations with him, grow from those, be able to make adjustments, with what we feel like we need based on those conversations, I think is going to be critical.
Nick, what's it been like getting to know the new guys, the new coaching staff guys coming in?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, we're still obviously getting to know each other, but it's been great so far.
With your personal relationship with JG, how hard was it to see him get let go, and then how valuable is he to your coaching growth?
Yeah, I mean, what the disappointing thing about it is, he put me in position to, help him have success, and we fell short. And so, I know he's a great coach. I think he's going to go on and have success and do great things. But you want to, people that put you in those positions, you want to be able to go out there and achieve things for them. So, he's been huge for my career. He's always a resource I can lean on. That's one of my close friends. But yeah, I think he's going to go on and do great things. And, I'm here now. We're not together, and I'm going to learn from Mike, and I'm excited as hell going forward.
When JG was here, he talked about wanting to improve the player development operations in place, and that was something Monty even mentioned, explaining the decision to move on from JG with player development. Why or how do you think that the player development here can improve, especially since you're still here? Like, what can you do to be better in that area on the defensive side?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different things. It's funny you asked that. I was working on that this morning in terms of how do we improve, in layman's terms, teaching in the classroom. I call it like cognitive recall, because on the grass, it ultimately comes down to decisions and actions. How fast can they make a decision, and can they carry out the action necessary to execute the scheme? And so we got to go back and rehash, like, is there any other ways that we can teach this thing, or should we be changing how we're teaching it, what we're teaching, so that it ups execution and performance. And then there's the motor learning side, the actions, and really diving into how can we improve techniques that we feel like we maybe didn't execute at a high level. How can we drill those things better? How can we improve the underlying, physical outputs that carry out those techniques? So deep dive in that 100%, because that's our job as coaches, is to develop, and that's the most important thing. And the better a player becomes, the better the team becomes. And if you do that with every guy, you're going to be a good team.
Nick, is there a point where you draw a line in the sand and say, we're trying to teach too much, we're trying to do too much where guys can't relax and just play?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a balance. I want guys to play fast, play free, so that they can, take the ball away, play violent. So, there's a balance of that and not being checkmated by offenses 100%. And it's just finding that happy medium, I think is the most important thing.
In your initial conversations with Mike, how much of it went back to week 2 of 2024, and what was it like going against him?
Yeah, he always wants to bring that one up, and then they've had definitely their good games against stuff, and I always want to bring those ones up. Yeah, we've talked about all our games. We actually when we went back to 2021 when he was in New York and I was in Philly, and talked about those matchups, and he's got a really good memory. I'll say that, because I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I'm in there like, oh yeah, that play. Oh yeah, I remember that. Play 34. Yep, the second quarter, and like it's unbelievable. Like, I think he remembers every single play, going back 5 years ago. So those we definitely, he's brought that game up a lot. But we've talked about the 6 games we had the past 3 years, which has kind of been an awesome experience, being able to share kind of the thoughts behind all those games and kind of see the evolution of both his offense and then our defense throughout that time.
Is there any sort of bond being young guys that are doing something for the first time?
Is there a bond? Absolutely. I think me and Mike connect really well. Is it because we're young? I couldn't tell you that.